So I want to start the presentation with a quote from a very famous architect, one of my favorite, Frank Lloyd Wright, who said, "You can use an eraser on the drafting table, or you can use a sledgehammer on the construction site." Obviously, what he's getting at is what I think this entire presentation will be about, which is the more you think about what you want up front, the less you have to fix it at the back end. And I think it's really important to think through that, especially in the world of AI, because there's so much there that you can touch, that you can put in place, and then you can take back out because it wasn't exactly what you wanted. So we're going to talk about three main things in this conversation. One is that AI is for real. It's here to stay. What it means is going to continue to evolve, but the topic is not going away. That said, this concept of measuring twice before cutting once is every bit as applicable to this concept as any other. And I go back to some of the very large ERP implementations that I think organizations experienced back in the 80s and 90s. You had $100 million applications that when they finally got put in, missed so many things that ultimately they never got anywhere near the return on investment that they wanted to. That doesn't have to happen here. And lastly, what we are going to argue, and it may be a counter stance, may not, is that the way you need to explore this topic is on a focus on outcomes as opposed to capabilities. So we have a kind of negative reaction at LoadSpring to this concept of the art of the possible, because that's not what you're interested in is the possible. What you're interested in is the practical and the thing that will specifically help you in what you're dealing with right now. And so we have an orientation and approach for how we think about that, which is all part of the presentation. So let's first talk a little bit about just about LoadSpring, because I don't know how many of you know LoadSpring as an organization. So our mission, and this is something we just refreshed with our management team back in July, I think, right, is to be an organization that empowers other organizations to achieve unparalleled success in shaping the world's global infrastructure projects. To do that, what we believe is that we need to be able to provide those organizations with a tool set and a technology ecosystem that allows them to make better decisions. If they make better decisions, then projects will go better. If projects go better, the world's infrastructure gets built. And frankly, this is something that I think everybody now is finally starting to talk about, which is we are going to have to rebuild and build the world's global infrastructure. And so our goal as LoadSpring is to be a major part of that by helping the organizations who do it to be able to do it better. A little bit of our history. So I've been around with the company now for a little over 2.5 years, and I describe it as one of the best kept secrets. This company's actually been around since 1999. One of the very first that actually started putting projects into the cloud. And we would argue that we are the world's leader in that. We have more than 800 customers, 10,000 plus projects going on at any one point in time, 100,000 users that are currently on our platform. And we've done over $1 trillion worth of projects on our platform in our history. What it does today is it really provides you with the ability to have a private cloud infrastructure that hosts your project management tools. What it will be in the future, the pivot that we are making as an organization, is we can't just be a cloud hosting provider and give you what you need. That was really great 15, 20 years ago. Now it's basically penny stakes. You have to have that in order to even be in the game. But it's really about the data and the tools that sit on top of it. So our technology solutions, which we are building with our partner, is really about creating better informed decisions, optimizing your processes, and at the end of the day, you will have better outcomes because you are more informed in terms of what you were trying to do and what has happened. So the way we talk about outcome-based exploration, right, it means you start with what is your goal? Not what is your tool, not what is your technology capability, but what is your business goal? And is it aligned across the organization such that all the people are going to be able to tie against that? Because if that doesn't happen, then you put all the tools in the world. If your organization is not aligned, you're not going to get what you want out of it. Second is focus on data quality. There'll be a phrase that I'll use a little bit later, but my partner was at a conference for Microsoft, and they were talking about AI tools. And one of the conversations that was put to one of the large consulting companies was, how do you deal with the data problem? So you've got these fantastic tools and you're putting them on data for which you have really questionable validity to them. And the answer they gave was, well, we wait for the bad outcomes to happen and then we go fix the data. Like, I think that's great if you're a consulting firm and you're looking for more business, but I think if you're an organization who's dealing with that, that's probably not the best way to go. So we strongly believe that in the world of quote unquote measure twice and AI once, you gotta know where your data is so that you apply the tools on the data that's legitimate and you have a plan in place to deal with the data that's not. And then lastly, we have a mentality and a model which we talk about calling analyze backwards and build forwards. And what that means is that you start again with a business problem, and we'll go through this in terms of a methodology we use, to decompose it into base elements so that you can build back up your technology largely the way you currently think as an organization, but with new tools to make that happen. So rather than trying to come at it by taking some greenfield approach, decompose what you have, and then you can build it right back up. And hopefully it will make sense, and if not, then please tell us, because we love the feedback. So let's start with the specifics in an example. I'll use an example as we go along. So first thing is focus on desired outcomes. That means not what can this do for you, but what problem are you currently dealing with? Don't even worry about the tools yet. So we were working with an AEC company in the UK who consistently has a problem with the quality schedule when they're supposed to have inspections. And what happens is they miss a couple. So then the replanning basically just shows those getting dropped into the next week. And so now instead of 4 inspections, there's 6. And then 2 weeks later, those get missed, and so then there's 8, and then there's 10, and then there's 12. And so the reality is, at some point, you know that there's no way you're going to get those ever caught up. It's just the way that people keep the schedule green. And so how do you fix that? Well, you start with, that's the problem. Now, let's take that, is that key to our business goals? Because if it's not key to our business goals, then no one's going to pay any attention to it. In this particular case, it was really key because they were getting dinged in some of their contracts for having these things continue to stretch out and missing schedules. And then lastly, at the end of that, you are going to have to make a decision about whether or not the tools that you got led to better outcomes. And so if what you're putting in doesn't allow you to make better decisions, it's not valuable. And so what we're trying to do in this orientation is to figure out AI for the sake of AI is worthless. AI for the sake of giving you the ability to make better decisions is critical. And if you don't do it, somebody else is going to. So here's what we typically see, the capability-based approach. And I don't know how many of you ever follow Simon Sinek, but one of the things he talks a lot about is, stay focused on the why, not the what. If you look at so many of the presentations of tools that are out there, what you get is a feature set. And it tells you all the things that it's capable of doing. But it doesn't tell you how any of those are actually going to make your decision better. And so it leaves you to try to make those connections. And so what happens is you get very much about technology capabilities. It's all about technological innovation. And I have a father-in-law who is an engineer. They love to build things just because they can. Right? It's like, this is a really cool thing that I just developed in the lab. Great, but where are we going to use it? Right? And flexibility and adaptation, you hear that a lot. At least be a little bit careful of that, because oftentimes that is marketing for, we don't know exactly how it's supposed to work, so we're going to give you the ability to tell us exactly where you want it to go so that we can get it into your organization, but it doesn't mean that, again, we're going to make things better. So I'll go back up. Outcomes-based approach is very much about, there's an ROI. I've got a problem. I'm going to put tools against that problem. At the end of that, I'm going to be able to measure whether I got better decisions. Capability-based approach, I'm talking about the technology. At the end of it, I can do things, but nothing is specifically tied to whether or not I'm going to get a better outcome from my organization. So I'll go past this because we just discussed that. So here are the challenges. In an outcomes-based approach, you actually have to think a lot about what it is that is your business problem that you're trying to solve. And how are you going to measure its success? So it is really measure twice. Right? It's easy to get to a conceptual level of it would be great if we could connect cost and data, or cost and schedule and risk. It'd be awesome if we could do that. Okay? But for what purpose? What is the specific problem that if you could do those things, you would actually change the way you run your business? That's the second level of order thinking, hence why we call it measure twice. With that, what we believe you will get when you go to analyze these tools is you get a clear connection between what you're trying to put in place and a way to measure it. We think that leads to more efficiency. We think your processes get optimized better. You will get an iterative approach by nature, which means it doesn't have to be a big bang investment. Take a problem, try to solve it. When you solve it, if you generate high ROI, my experience is that most organizations will give you lots more money. If the first one is successful, you'll get a second one. And if the second one is successful, you get a third one. If you try to go and say we need a $100 million data transformation program, you probably get kicked back. So let's talk about what's required for that to happen, though. Data. And by a show of hands, how many people think your data is really clean? How many people think it's kind of clean? How many think it needs a lot of work? Okay. AI tools can actually make that work much better too. So one of the things that we have found when it comes to data, and this is why we like the outcomes-based approach versus the capability-based approach, is that you have these efforts to try to map the entire data world and tie all these things together. And you're doing that in what we call an algorithmic connection. So I have 85 data elements in this system. I've got 90 data elements in this system. I've got 200 in that system. I'm going to try to connect all those together. When you think about all the point-wise comparisons that could happen, and the fact that because I'm trying to connect it so tightly, every one of this has to match. It's like if there's a spelling error, it stops matching. First of all, that exercise is monstrous, right? As a former mathematician, if I take 80 times 120 times another 80, and then you put a fourth system in there, right, you're talking about hundreds of thousands, if not millions of connections that you have to make. Let's say you make it. That works right up until the next upgrade. And then it's going to break all those connections again. So the idea of the old-fashioned data mapping and the tight data connections that came with algorithmics just doesn't work anymore. Right? The data is too prolific. I think Eric Schmidt said at one point, like, there's been more data created in the last 2 years than in the previous 200, right? And it's going to continue to go that way. So what we need to move from is that really tight data analytics model to a much more, I'll call it a large language model environment. So how many of you travel to like international cities? Okay. How many of you speak their language perfectly? And yet, how many of you generally can get around in those cities and do what you need to do? Most of them, right? The reality is the human brain can take a misconstrued sentence, even words that are not exactly right, and it knows how to put context behind them, and it knows how to connect them together. And so you don't have to be perfect in terms of your data connection if you're starting to use today's AI tools, which are much more referential and contextual as opposed to algorithmic. They allow you to take words that are close together, misspellings. It will know that those things are likely the same. And the tools can actually offer that up to you and say, are these the same? I think they are. You tell me if they are, then I can permanently make that connection. And so what that allows you to do is to get much more of your data to be usable. With much more of your data usable, then your AI tools are going to be much more effective. Right? And so we talk about, in the world of AI, and I can't remember the first time we ever had this discussion, but the problem with AI tools is that they are very slick. They make you believe that you have a high confidence, highly precise, and generally very quick answer. The problem is if it's sitting on bad data, you just got a highly precise, high confidence, fast, bad answer. My preference if I'm going to get bad answers, can they be slow, not very precise, and I don't have a lot of confidence in them. So without your data being in the right spot, right, your tools are going to fail. Two examples that we ran into. One is, again, a UK-based partner of ours is currently building, this would be the safety one, is building a hospital. The data in their schedules has the inspection dates wrong. So the AI tool goes in and sees the inspection date, goes to the completion section of the schedule, sees that things aren't complete, flags every single one of those as a safety error. So the next thing you know, you've got a hospital that you're building. First of all, hospitals, please don't have safety errors in hospitals. That shows up with like 1,000 flags because the data just around when the inspection schedules were wrong. There was nothing wrong about the work. It was just that the system, because it had bad data in there, gave a really bad but highly precise answer. Right? Another one that we've talked about, right, is with regard to particularly schedules, and we ran into it with cranes. It was interesting. So crane usage, and I didn't realize this, many of them sit unused for as much as 40% of their time. Now, if you happen to put them in the wrong environments from a weather perspective, then they could be sitting for 60 or 80% of the time, unless you actually organize that on really windy days, you don't send sheets up, right? You send bulk heavy materials, much easier. And so because they actually had the wrong data, they literally were shipping the wrong materials to the site for the crane to use, and because of the weather, they couldn't use them. Right? And so they went from like a 40% effective use of their cranes to like a 20% effective, which is really expensive because cranes cost regardless of whether you use them or you don't use them. So just a couple of very specific examples that if your data is wrong, you can have a real bad problem. So our belief, and this is the only time we're going to have a little bit of a promotion right, about what we do, is that the digital transformation path goes from get in the cloud, clean your data, then spend your time trying to figure out your predictive transformation path. We see way too many people are going directly from cloud to predictive. They find out that they have incorrect data, then they go back and they try to fix it, but they've already picked their models. Right? They already have their infrastructure in place. If you're not already in the cloud, we would do exactly the same thing that we're talking about now, which is the iterative process. Pick a problem. Right? And we'll get to our racetrack discussion in a second. Pick a problem which tells you what analytics you need, which tells you what data you need. If it's not already in the cloud, put that in the cloud. Right? Why put everything there? This is also why we're very keen on private clouds as opposed to like the big public clouds, is because especially in the defense area, we have some very specific mechanisms where we want people to access, but we want nobody else to access. But you're exactly right. The whole concept that we're talking about in this digital transformation is it's not a Big Bang theory. It can't be. Right? There's way too many unknowns that you learn as you go through your iterative process. And so if you pick a problem, run this entire path, you find out what you didn't do right, and you don't have to do that again, but you didn't do it on 99% of your data because you only needed the 1% to answer your specific question. So completely agree with you. If you're not already in the cloud with all of your data, no reason to just throw it up there as a start. But to do this, you want whatever data you are going to use to be in the cloud because you want that broader access. You want the collaborative capabilities that come from that. Right? And today's on-prem infrastructure just makes that hard to do. So let's talk about our, actually this is fun. We've done, and so this I think is consistent with what you described, we've done a number of data projects for our customers. And on a consistent basis, particularly schedule-related data, what we tend to find is about a third, call it 30, 35% of that data is actually usable in its raw form that is sufficiently robust and contextualized that you know what to do with it. Right? A good 2/3 of the data is not and needs either fixing or enhancement. It's amazing how many times we find that the start date is after the end date. I would love to know how those projects work. Or we've got the same start date and end date. So, a multi-million-dollar project that landed in a day. And a lot of it is because the data is entered retroactively or the data is copied and pasted. And so even just the data governance is a problem. So one of the things you find by going after your data first is how to fix your governance process. What we then do just from a process standpoint is we try to take that raw data. I call it the big box of my kids' Legos, right? Where they used to be part of something and now they're just part of a mess, right? And it's the process of going through and putting them back in the structure that they're supposed to, kicking out the ones that don't make sense, but learning from the ones that don't make sense on how do you make the next ones better. So when I say analyze backwards, build forwards, I'll go through this pretty quickly because I know we're going to run out of time. So let's go to the chart. There it is. So what we believe is that there's a ton of deductive reasoning that you can actually build into the way you operate that will save you an immense amount of time. So back to, if you know what your business goals are, there's 2 or 3 questions that your senior management team is asking you. Like, I would like to know this. If you take those questions, you can decompose them into the specific analytics that you need. Those specific analytics then have inputs in order for those analytics to run. Those inputs come from core data elements, and then you can go find those core data elements. So in the world of solving that problem, how much of the data world do I actually need to map? Right? The answer is not 80 by 120 by 240 and trying to get them all right. It's probably a core set of 15 or 20 data elements that I need to get right. That's something I can handle. That's something a SWAT team can handle. So then you figure out where they're located, what systems they're in, what mappings you need to connect, and then you do the secondary process, which is now I know what I need, and I decomposed it all the way down to the base data element. Now I can reconstruct it backwards. How do I build something that creates that data with right governance? How do I collect it? How do I clean it and validate it? How do I connect it together inside the analytics? And then how do I run that back into the report or the ratio or the metric or whatever it is that the management team wants? I didn't have to do a multi-million-dollar, multi-year data project to get there. I took one problem with a set of really cool tools. I can basically make that happen. So when we say analyze backwards, build forwards, that's what we mean. And I'll put it back up for just a second. And in that context, you can do this lots of times. And you may get it wrong. But what you're going to do by getting it wrong is you're going to learn how to get it right the next time. And after you get 3 or 4 or 5 of these, you will know exactly what tools you need, what works. You will know what platforms make sense. And now you can start making some big AI investment decisions because you've run enough of these case examples through your process to know what you really need. That's at least our view. So I'll leave you just with a couple of final thoughts and then all the questions. So we do believe AI is here to stay, and people who don't adopt it will get left behind. You can truly see meaningful impact because of the speed, the capabilities that this brings to you, and it allows your people to stay focused on the things they're particularly good at. But be very careful about what we call the AI shiny object. There's a lot of people who are going to describe to you things that it can do, but if they are not tied to business problems, they will likely be things, and I have a whole garage full of tools that I love to buy. I got them home and I never use them, and they sit in one corner and they're still shiny because I ended up never using what I bought. So plan, do some thinking. I know it's hard sometimes because everybody wants to go fast. Like we keep hearing, like the board is on us to really demonstrate how we're doing AI. Right? Like, okay, but is the board telling you that they want you to spend $25 million and then turn around and lose it a year later because what you built was not what you wanted? My guess is just tell them you're doing a little bit more thinking. And then ultimately, we believe if you do this right, AI will pay off in a big way. And so that is what we are talking to all of our clients about. And we've had clients who've said, how would you build this big thing for us? And we said, well, we'll start with one. Because we want to know that it's right too. I don't want to go build something big for you until I know enough about your organization that I know what I'm building is going to be something that you want for a while. Because I like erasers, not sledgehammers. This is my positioning statement for that, which is you could start this way, which I think is the way a lot of organizations started, which is I've got a cloud transformation phase, and then I've got a data transformation phase, and then I'm going to get into the AI phase. And when you tell that story, people are like, okay, AI is 3 years down the road, right? Because I have to go through all these phases to get there. And that's why we're saying break that up into a single problem. Now your data cleaning is part of your AI journey. It's not a predecessor to your AI journey, it's actually part of it. So you're going to do this, right? You're going to use AI to basically get you an answer to a business goal. That's going to allow you to talk about data governance as part of my AI plan. Getting my vendors on board is part of my AI plan. It's not a precursor to it, it is part of it. And so when people are saying like, you're slowing down our AI journey, you're like, no, we're already on it, right? It is part of our AI journey. And I think it ends up telling the story in a much better way, because when people think about these things sequentially, and especially like governmental, right, those things can become monoliths, right? And you never get to the end of it. And so by breaking it down into an individual problem with a very clear beginning and end, and these are 3-month, 4-month projects, you'll be able to show them exactly why, for example, because we did this for Project X, right, our quality data or our safety project, this is why we need the vendor's governance on data. Because we couldn't get to the answer we wanted to, but you can show them that in months instead of in years. And then, especially as the government, you start building those directly into your contracts, which is they have to provide it to you in that context. Build it as part of your RFP. Our view is that we don't want to design products. What we want to design is solutions. And so what we'll bring to the table are capabilities. Mm-hmm. And so this is less about construct and more about configure. Mm-hmm. So there was a conversation earlier about LLMs where I'd asked the question, how do you train an LLM to operate in your environment? Because you probably have user-defined fields that your standard LLM isn't going to know about, and you probably have non-standard WBS that's coming from, a client that's asking you to use their version. Mm-hmm. Like, the LLM is still the same LLM. Mm-hmm. So if you were calling it a product, it would be the same product. Yeah. But you have to configure it. And if you don't,
So we'll say process. Yeah. Replace product with process. Yep. And essentially, your consulting service guiding us along this path to get us to the end result, which is the answer to a business question, right? Which matters. Yes. But getting us there systematically and then faster and faster and faster.
Yes. And with product sets, to your point down here, or I'll call them capability sets. Mm-hmm. Yep. Down here. So we have an integrator capability that we bring to the table. We have large language models that we bring to the table. We have what's called our Rosetta Stone, which is basically the technology for connecting and building libraries and a thesaurus and a translator. Yeah. Those are all capabilities, but you're going to be different, right, mm-hmm. than anybody else in terms of specifically how to use it. So the goal is to give you something that is tailored. So
I appreciate that. Yeah, so that's why I use the phrase the design build approach to this. Yep. So then I'll follow that with the next question, because again, right, that is part of why I tend to not buy all of these other products, because I agree, 95% of it never going to use, right? But the other issue with these products, I'm just curious for yours, is also you have to live in their ecosystem. Mm-hmm. I understand the data has to live there, otherwise it doesn't work. But you have to kind of be all in. And most of us companies, we already have our systems. We want to be able to put in the 20%, get the 80% out.
Yes.
We don't want to have to abandon all of our systems and then live in your ecosystem, if that makes sense.
Yes. especially with your data. So the way that at least our tooling and our capabilities are built, right, they're data model agnostic and the data is yours. So the whole model that we have with this private cloud structure is whether you're in a SaaS version of P6 or you're on an on-prem version that we're hosting, that data is yours, not ours. That environment is yours, not ours. Mm-hmm. And so our tools are designed to work on your environment, not the other way around. Mm-hmm. So Integrator, again, which is one of the capabilities that we have, it's designed to sit in between all of your systems so you don't have to move all of your systems to our system in order for our tools to work. Right? So it brings those data pieces together for the purpose of analytics, but it leaves it where it is resident in your organization. So to your point, we are not asking you to drop kind of what you have built to come into our environment. It's more we are going to put capabilities onto your environment that are yours, and they're custom. Like even the LLMs, and we're doing this right now for another, we're doing a lot of stuff in the UK right now. We're training an LLM to specifically speak their language. Mm-hmm. That LLM will never be used by any other organization. It's theirs.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Do you have a demo? We have multiple ones. So I don't have it here. But yeah, if you come by our booth, we'll show you what our LoadSpring Cloud platform does. And then we have a Project Insights, which I think we can also potentially demo from there. And then the rest of the stuff, we'll set up a custom demo for you if you want. Okay, out of time. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.